Hello, everybody. Andy Jacob here with the Entrepreneur Spotlight series. And this special program today is part of our Author Spotlight. And of course, you've been watching all the authors that we have on the show, and we've been able to find an amazing author. He's introspective, he's very interesting. He had to get all of what was in his brain down in black and white because there's so much going on in there. He's been working on this book for a long time. It's called Finding the Next Step in Our Evolution. And for the people that watch the show, you know we love learning about the mind. We love learning about sort of how to become somebody new and how to sort of change the dynamic of what you're thinking about. And we've got Mr. Jeff Cooke on the show. He enjoys nature walks when he's not writing, slow conversations, which is what we're going to have today. And he's very reflective, as you'll see during this interview today. But Jeff, I want to welcome you to the Entrepreneur Spotlight series featuring very, very excellent authors today.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you, Jeff. I mean, we had a little bit of a pre-interview. I had a chance to review the book. We're going to put the book cover up on the screen as we have this interview. We'll also put links to the book below the interview so people can click on it and hopefully go and buy the book because it's very interesting. But let's pull the lens back to 30,000 feet because this is kind of some heady stuff. Let's try and simplify it. Tell us about finding the next step in our evolution, what it's all about, and then we're going to go.
Well, it's essentially about how humans have come to a stage that is ready to be challenged to move on to the next step of our conscious evolution. At an earlier point, our brains became larger and we got these great things out of these complex brains we get so much, but we also get a side effect that is suffering onto ourselves because we can't help but identify with thoughts. And the next step is the ability to have a mind and not be fully absorbed by it.
So that's great, Jeff. And of course, when we think about it, we have people watching the show that sometimes need things summarized a little bit for them. Maybe if you could break it down what you're saying in a way that maybe a high schooler could understand it, because we like to simplify things here and then we're going to take it and broaden it. So simplify finding the next step in our evolution. In other words, let's talk about returning to stillness and wisdom that already lives within us, but let's break it down simply for a high schooler to understand.
Yes, well, an interesting aspect is that words are very limited in what this is pointing towards. I'm trying to use words, but I'm hoping that when the reader is reading the book, they can kind of feel the inner presence that's always within us, that is not just the mind reading the words, but a deeper part of themselves that's being pointed towards. That's basically an inner peace that has always been within us, but it's always been covered up by overactive mind activity.
So that's really interesting, Jeff. And of course, when we think about it, it's a crazy world out here. We've got cell phones, we've got social media. Things are moving very, very fast. We get sort of bombarded with all of this information from the outside. But I want to talk about with you being in the moment. How important is it to be in the moment? Like when you have conversations with people that you meet, or even in this conversation, how important is it to be in the moment versus being bombarded by all these things that are going on in the outside?
Well, really, all of our life is within the present moment. You can't really be outside of the present moment because when it was the past, it was the present moment. When it's the future, it's going to be the present moment. And planning or remembering has a certain value to it, but not as many thoughts are as useful as we think they are.
Interesting. That's really interesting. So let's just say you're having a conversation with someone. How do you open up a person to sort of be present? Do you ask questions to that person? Do you give them good eye contact? If you're in the moment and you're kind of connected in this very special way, do you feel that they then connect with you in this very primal and special way as well? In other words, what's the best way to communicate with people to be in the present moment?
Well, that I'm still trying to figure out. This book came about from over probably a decade and a half of trying to have this conversation with other people and just not really being able to. And the only way I figured I could was to write a book. It's kind of like the universe gave me this challenge and said, try to figure out how, because I really, at an earlier time, I really needed to. And I was kind of anxious. I need to try to, nobody seemed to understand it. And later on, I kind of came more to the realization that if I write a book about it, then it's kind of all written down. And really, I would say this book came a little bit before that time of that was, I think it was 2006. I was diagnosed with epilepsy. And so for about a year and a half to 2 years, I was I was having physical stress on my body. I was waking up early in the morning on the floor because I just dislocated my shoulder backwards. Couldn't figure out why. Went to the emergency room a couple times. All they could really do was tell me I was having night traumas. And it showed me an exercise. If I like pushed my shoulder against the wall the right way, it would bring it back in the right place. But it wasn't until I was at work one day and I woke up in an ambulance and they told me I just had a seizure that I figured out what that was or what the condition was. And from that point on, it was a time frame of just body stress and mental stress. But within that space, you could say chaos can have a purpose. It can create space for something new to come in. So during this time, um, I was having these moments of what I like to call wait a second moments where I was starting to notice my mind was doing certain things, but I couldn't really formulate the question. It was just enough space was opening up for the question, but I couldn't answer it. And then one day, my sister gave me this book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And as I was reading this book, it was like answering these questions I could barely formulate. And from that point on, I began my own journey of awakening out of identification with the mind to a deeper awareness of ourselves. And I was finding that outside of the mind, there's this peace within us that's always here. It's just covered up by endless thinking and emotions that go along with it. And the longer we can just be patient with ourselves, have compassion for ourselves, and just notice the thoughts that we have that drag us into places of of suffering that we're essentially the mind is addicted to, but it doesn't know it's addicted to. It's resisting resistance, which just creates more resistance. And from that point on, I was trying to find the conversation with other people, but they hadn't had some kind of personal experience of their own to really understand what I was talking about. So it probably looked like I was a religious person trying to tell them about my religion, and it was just falling on deaf ears, very understandably for them, until I got to a place where I was realized I need to write a book, and then maybe people will understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I love it. Let's talk about the wait a second moments. I mean, I can see that being the title of your next book. I mean, that's fantastic. The wait a second moments. Let's talk about that because we're so in our mind, at least if you're an entrepreneur like the ones watching the show or the authors watching the show, we're thinking all the time. We almost can't stop our brain from going, going, going,
Yeah.
going. How do we slow it down? Because I know you believe that stillness and wisdom already exists and lives within us. What can we do to slow down our brain a little bit? All these thoughts coming through. Do we meditate? Do we take a deep breath? Do you have any secrets about how you get to the wait a second moments?
Well, meditation is really great. I think the first step in meditation is a lot of this. You just kind of notice how much the mind is thinking. You become more and more the observer of your thoughts. And it's always good. to notice your breathing and try to bring attention into the body. And the gaps between thoughts at first will be like really short. But if you're conscious during these gaps between thoughts, you can ask yourself, well, what's conscious in between two thoughts? Because the scientific premise is essentially that consciousness starts from the mind, but really our mind is conscious because we're conscious. Other animals are conscious, they have the development of their mind. We have this overactive mind that is a very great tool in certain ways, but it also creates suffering for itself and others when we're stuck thinking that my life needs to be better. I won't be happy until this happens or until I get away from that. But really, we find the answers when we can be, or we find better answers when we can be deeply present. And the answer kind of comes to us like Einstein said, think about it 99 times and you can't find anything. Stop thinking once and the answer just comes to you. So within our own lives, the wisdom's there, but our mind is just like trying to grasp onto what it thinks the answer is. That doesn't work. And it tries all the things that it can and just can't really, it just goes around in circles and circles while while clinging to this sort of identity because it doesn't want to lose this or it is afraid to take that step over there. So we just seem to be stuck in the identity of ourselves instead of allowing sort of the universe to sort of unfold within us.
Yeah, very interesting. That's some intellectually stimulating thoughts that you have there, Jeff. I think people probably are going to want to rewind that and listen again what you just said. But we have had a lot of entrepreneurs on the show, a lot of leading experts worldwide in their specific and related fields. And one thing I hear quite often from very successful people is when they sit down and they start thinking and they want to think about something, or they're trying to think about a breakthrough, or they're trying to think about a new pivot, or they're trying to think about something to do with their business. They tell me, oftentimes those are the times that nothing comes to me.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm out in nature, or I'm walking on a lake, or I'm walking along the water, or I'm up in a mountain, or I'm, in the snow. Something pops in my mind that's sort of a piece of wisdom that I can use. And I'm thinking maybe it's the stillness of those moments, being in nature, because I hear
Yeah.
it so often that nature really can clear people out, and something comes to the surface that they've never thought of before, sort of is reflective of what you're talking about. Am I seeing that correct?
Yes, that's the beauty of just being out in nature. Like the trees are so still and your mind slows down a little bit. You can find reflections so much more easily. There's a a story within Zen where people go out to chop wood, carry water all day, and they go out in nature. This is kind of nice, and then their mind starts coming in more and more, and they might find the complaining in the mind, like, why do we have to do this every day? Chop wood every day. We couldn't they hire someone to do this? But the practice is actually to just have you do the one task at a time. And as the Zen student goes out into nature long enough, they start to actually feel the presence within themselves. And it's kind of a reflection of the presence of the all of these life forms of the trees that are around them. And you begin to realize that this is not a separate life form to me. They're separate forms, but there's something deeper than the form that is within us all. We are nature. The world is like a superorganism, and we're a part of that. We've kind of lost that because we've gone into this sort of alternate direction that is necessary because we need this complex mind to evolve. Life wants to evolve this way. And then it gets to a certain point where it's like you banging up against the wall. You can't quite figure out where we go from here. And that creates like I was saying before, it just create the mind creates more and more suffering for itself until you get to a place where you need to get away from the suffering. And it's the suffering is my problem. And unfortunately, some people will end up committing suicide because their mind is just so self-suffering. But other people will have that kind of wait a second moment and they start to observe something, and maybe a teacher comes along, or some people will have enough suffering that within themselves, like the story of the Buddha or Jesus, I believe Lao Tzu is another story, where they themselves just have such a strong acknowledgement of this deep presence within us that is just peaceful and not of the mind. And that takes over the overthinking process. And what most people will find where most people will find a teaching, and it's kind of a slow and steady place where you're kind of where I'm at basically. It's kind of a little bit of both. The mind will create some suffering for itself, but I also have this outlet now where I can feel this deeper presence. And going into nature is a great place to just practice that, slowing the mind down and seeing that there's more to us than the mind. The mind thinks that its mental image of itself is all that it is, and that's extremely restricting. But when we find this deeper part of ourselves, we realize we are the universe, becoming aware that we are the universe that is as a human being, an expression, or the human is an expression of ourselves or
Yeah.
of the universe.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me, Jeff, that when I was younger, I collected art, and I was a big art collector, and I love art very much, and I still have art in storage and art in my homes. And recently, just in let's say the past 10 years, I've stopped collecting. And
Oh,
somebody asked me, why did you stop collecting art? And my answer is because my new art, or the way I look at art now, is nature. I would rather go outside and watch the seagulls fly, or I would rather go out in nature and see some beautiful owls or a bald eagle flying, or just smell the grass or see the trees. And that's a way that I get to calm myself. Now, I have a friend. We went out to dinner recently, Jeff, and throughout the conversation, throughout the dinner, he had his cell phone out and he
mm.
always was chatting. The chat GPT always wanted to know the answer if we were talking about things, and he always had to go to chat. By the end of the dinner, I called him Mr. Chat because he had to, instead of Googling everything, now he's chatting everything with
Wow.
AI. And I'm thinking to myself, the more people go to get all the answers to all their questions on either a Google platform or a chat platform or an AI platform, the more their brains are going to go to mush. That's what I think is going to
Mm.
happen because they're not thinking for themselves. So, do you feel that AI is going to be something that's going to put people in a better position to be able to be reflective and have peace, or you think it's going to be something that's maybe going to cause more chaos and more destruction to the human brain? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think where we are in this moment is kind of where humans were in 1880 when Paris first ignited all their streetlights with electricity. And you could ask any one of them, like, what will the world be in 1980? There's no way they would know. I think where we're at with AI is there's this wall that we can't see behind where it's going to go. But I feel that AI, as it is right now, kind of in its toddler age or so, it can easily be manipulated by the human mind, and computers and AI are kind of an extension of the human mind. But I feel as it reaches more of an adult place of its intelligence, it will be more and it will be such a super intelligence that it will look way more for a symbiotic way of living. It won't see the world as like the Terminator version, or a Matrix version, which is great in a movie. You need to entertain people, but in reality, I think it will be helpful for us at some point.
I
It,
love it. Yeah, I love that, Jeff. That's fantastic. I mean, to be helpful and symbiotic, that would be fabulous, of course. Now, let's talk about some action steps for people
Okay.
watching the show. We have some entrepreneurs watching the show, Jeff. They're probably in the middle of a pivot. Maybe they're freezing in the frame. Maybe they're having a tough time in their business right now. What can we share with these entrepreneurs based on your book, Finding the Next Step in Our Evolution, about the mind? What kind of things can you share with these entrepreneurs having a tough time? Because you went through a tough time in your personal life. Everybody goes through tough times, but you've
Yeah.
been able to come out the other end very well. For the people having a tough time in their life or business right now, what can you share with them based on some of the bullet points in your book that can help them get through a tough time in their business or life?
Well, I would say, who is the I who's having a tough time? Because really, everything that you're going through your life is just one step at a time. The mind gets frustrated about this or that, but you eventually get to the next step. But the I that's having the tough time is the mind that's just tumbling over itself. It should be this way. It shouldn't be that way. I should have gotten to here by now. Why isn't this working out for me? There's no way that I can find peace right now because surely I haven't gotten my life in order yet. So there's no way I can find peace. But if you can find this stillness that's always within us, just become more aware of the gaps between thoughts, or just when you are having a tough time, just kind of whatever your personal meditation practice might be, just come to a place where you become more aware of your body, more aware of your breathing. Just find that peace, and answers come because they're already there.
Yeah, I love
It's
it.
just the mind that's stumbling over itself that thinks it should be this or that, that won't allow us to come to the next answer that's already there.
I love it. For those people seeking personal growth, mindfulness, and really a deeper connection to life, check out Jeff's book. It's very thought provoking. It's an exploration of the human consciousness and self awareness. It really will challenge you to recognize and move beyond what we talked about, the dysfunctions of this modern life, being on the phone, being on chat, always being connected to the media, and really all this anxiety and stress and self judgment and disconnection can be, I'm going to say, fixed or improved by really deepening your understanding of yourself and the world around them. And that's what this book's all about. Jeff, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Entrepreneur Spotlight series today, telling us a little bit about the book. And we look forward to all the
Can
future
I
books
say
that you're going to be writing as well.
can I say one more thing?
Of course.
It's all of the chaos that we're seeing within the world right now is the same as the chaos that the individual has, because it may um, on the collective level, it needs this chaos, so to speak, in order to clear space for a peaceful world to come in. And it's going to be a collective amount of individuals who come to the realization that we don't need to fight each other and fight ideas of how the world should be to get to a peaceful world. It's simply, by what I was saying before, a collective will find, they'll actually turn the chaos into the tool for how to awaken from the chaos.
I love it, Jeff. It's very illuminating, it's very heady. And again, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank
journey
you.
and coming on the show to share how people perhaps could get a higher consciousness and self discovery. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.